Most women have no idea that the way they hug a man is quietly telling him exactly how she feels about him. Not her words, not how she looks. That one moment of contact says more than almost anything else. And here's the part that surprises people. The women who are naturally great at this aren't doing anything complicated or clever. They're simply not making the small mistakes that so many other women make without ever realizing it. Mistakes that quietly undercut any real spark before the guy even has a chance to consciously register what happened. I want you to really sit with that for a second, because we've all grown up hearing the same generic advice. Be yourself. Smile, be confident, all fine advice as far as it goes, but nobody, not your mother, not your closest friend, not a single article you've ever read, actually sat you down and explained what happens inside a man's body when a woman hugs him, what he actually feels physically in that moment, what draws him closer versus what makes him quietly retreat. Nobody ever taught that part. So if you've been getting this wrong, it's genuinely not your fault. How would you have known? In this breakdown, I want to walk you through 3 hugs that women give all the time, hugs that slowly push men away without any bad intention behind them whatsoever. And I'm not talking about women who don't care. I mean smart, genuine women who really do like the guy. These 3 patterns still do real damage quietly under the radar every single time. Then I'll show you a 4th approach, the one almost nobody talks about, the one that actually stays with him well after the night ends, the one that has him thinking about you the next morning during some completely unrelated quiet moment. Stick with this to the end, because that last part changes everything. Before diving into the details, there's one foundational idea everything else builds on. Men feel before they think. Most women assume men are up in their heads weighing whether they like someone based on the conversation, how funny she was, how much they have in common. All of that matters eventually, sure. But in the first few seconds of physical contact, his body has already answered questions his conscious mind hasn't even gotten around to asking. Is she relaxed around me? Does she actually enjoy being close to me? Or is she just being polite? His body works all of that out in the first 2 or 3 seconds of a hug, well before his mind catches up. That's not exaggeration. That's simply how humans are wired. We register physical signals far faster than we process language. So a hug isn't just a hug. It's a message. It tells him something real about how you feel, how present you are, whether you're actually with him in that moment or just going through emotion. And the gap between a hug that naturally draws him closer and one that slowly pushes him away is smaller than you'd expect, but it matters more than almost anything else you could do in that moment. Think back to a time someone hugged you and you could just tell they were genuinely glad to see you. You didn't have to think about it or analyze it. You simply felt it immediately. Now think of the opposite, the polite hug, the quick one, where you could sense the other person's mind was already somewhere else. You felt that too, instantly, without a word being exchanged. That's exactly what happens when you hug a man. He isn't consciously critiquing you. His body is just reading yours, and it gets the message before his brain even shows up. So what you do with your body in those 3 seconds matters enormously. Not because men are keeping some kind of score, but because that's simply the language physical contact speaks. And most of us were never taught how to speak it fluently. Let's get into the mistakes. The first is what I'd call the pat hug. You know this one. Nearly everyone has done it at some point. You go in for the hug, your arms wrap around him, and then pat, pat, pat. You're tapping his back like you're burping an infant. It sounds a little funny written out, but think about what that gesture actually communicates. That pat on the back is what people do when comforting someone who just got bad news. It's what you do with a distant cousin you see once a year and aren't entirely sure how close you still are. It's polite, harmless, and it has essentially zero real warmth in it. His body picks up on that instantly. She's keeping me at a safe distance. She doesn't really want to be here. And the frustrating part is, you probably didn't mean any of that. Maybe you were nervous, unsure what to do with your hands, and it happened automatically. But he doesn't know that. All he knows is what his body just registered. And what it registered was someone keeping him at arm's length. It's common to hear men describe this exact feeling afterward. It just felt like she wasn't really into it. She felt stiff. It seemed like she was already thinking about stepping back before the hug even started. That's the pat hug. It feels completely normal in the moment, maybe even safe, but it reads as cold and distant on the other end. The second mistake is the rushed hug, the one that lasts maybe half a second. Contact happens for barely a moment before you're already stepping back, sometimes before he's even fully registered it occurred. It's completely understandable why this happens. Maybe you're somewhere crowded, maybe you're nervous and don't want to linger, maybe you're simply trying not to seem like you're trying too hard. But here's what he actually takes away from a hug that brief. She wasn't that interested. That's it. His brain doesn't sort through the dozen possible reasons you might have pulled back quickly. It just observes what happened and draws a fast conclusion. Quick exit, low interest. That equation runs in the background, whether he consciously chooses it or not. This one is particularly tricky because plenty of women do this precisely because they like the guy. They're nervous, don't want to appear too eager, so they pull back fast to seem relaxed and unbothered. But here's the catch. Unbothered and uninterested look identical from the outside. There's no visible difference. So you think you're playing it cool, and he walks away thinking, she seems nice, but I'm honestly not sure she's feeling this, with no idea that's the impression he formed. The third mistake tends to cause the most quiet, cumulative damage over time. Call it the checked-out hug. This is when your body is physically present, but your mind is somewhere else entirely, maybe running through what you'll say next, maybe self-conscious about who else is nearby, maybe just tangled up in anxious internal chatter about how you're coming across. The hug technically happens, but you're not really in it. You're there physically without actually being there. Here's the thing to really understand. Men feel that. Not in some mysterious way, just in the ordinary human way we're all capable of sensing. When someone is genuinely present with you, fully attentive even for 3 or 4 seconds, it feels completely different from someone simply going through the motions. We've all experienced both, and we know the difference in our bodies even when we can't quite articulate it. It's common to hear something like, "I was so in my head that night, I couldn't relax at all," followed by surprise when things felt slightly off afterward. But what was actually happening is that he felt it too. He sensed you weren't fully with him. And it doesn't register as, "She must have been nervous," or "She had a lot on her mind." It registers as, "I guess I just wasn't that important to her right now." That stings, even when it's completely inaccurate, even if you were thinking about him the entire evening. If the hug felt empty, that's what gets filed away, and it quietly shapes how he feels about you going forward, whether he's consciously aware of it or not. Those 3 patterns, the pat, the rushed exit, and the checked out hug, happen constantly between people who genuinely like each other and have real potential together. And they do quiet damage that almost nobody ever traces back to its actual source. Now let's talk about what actually works, the hug that stays with him. This isn't about performing anything or layering some technique onto your natural self. It's simply about being genuinely present for a few seconds and letting your body communicate what you actually feel. Broken down, it really is that simple. Here's what it looks like in practice. Go in for the hug like it's a real decision you're making, not over the top or theatrical, just deliberate, like you actually chose this and you're following through with your whole body. Your arms wrap around him with genuine pressure, not an uncomfortable squeeze, but enough that he actually feels you there, enough that it registers. There's a real difference between touching someone and actually reaching them, and that difference comes down to a bit more intention behind the gesture. Here's the piece almost everyone skips entirely, and honestly, this single element makes more difference than everything else combined. Breathe. Take one genuine slow breath while you're in the hug. When you breathe, you actually relax, and when you relax, his body registers that and relaxes too. It sounds minor, but it isn't. If you're tense, holding your breath, quietly counting down until it's over, he feels every bit of that tension. But if you take one real breath and are genuinely present for a moment, his whole body responds. It's contagious. That single breath is the difference between a hug that feels like 2 people being politely obligatory story, and one that feels like two people who genuinely like each other. That's how much power one breath carries. Then there's the ending, and this matters far more than most people realize. Don't rush it. A lot of women start pulling back before the hug has actually finished, as if they're already half gone before they've fully left. Instead, stay just a beat longer than you normally would, not so long it becomes awkward, just long enough that he becomes aware the hug is ending, rather than sensing you were already 3 steps ahead of it. That small shift completely repositions you. You stop being the person who was already leaving and become the person who was fully there until the very last second, and that lands very differently. When you do pull back, let it be slow. Let your hands come off his back or arms gently rather than yanking away like you've got somewhere more urgent to be. That ending is the final thing he registers from the whole exchange. It's what he actually walks away with, so make it slow, easy, and natural. And when you step back, look at him for a second. A real look, not a rehearsed smile or a performance, just genuinely looking at him like you're glad that just happened. If you actually like this person, that look costs you nothing at all, and it lands with more impact than almost anything else in that moment. It communicates everything without a single word. Men often describe hugs like this in vivid detail years later, moments that lasted maybe 4 seconds, and when they try to explain what made it stick, it's usually something like, "I don't know how to describe it. She just made me feel like I was the only person in the room." And when you unpack what actually happened, it's almost always exactly this sequence. She was genuinely there. She wasn't rushing. She let it be real for a few seconds. Then she looked at him once it was over. That's the entire formula every time. Here's a truth about attraction that never makes it onto any motivational poster. Attraction isn't built in big, obvious moments or grand gestures. It's built in tiny instances of real connection that quietly accumulate over time. A genuine, present hug is one of the most powerful vehicles for that, because it requires no words, no planning, no strategy at all. It's just two people being real with each other for 3 seconds. And in a world where everyone is distracted and half checked out most of the time, that kind of genuine presence is genuinely rare. Rare things are what people remember. Now, something a bit deeper, because I think this is the actual reason so many women get this wrong, and it has nothing to do with technique. Most women who default to the rushed hug, the pat, or the checked out hug aren't doing it because they don't like the guy. They're doing it out of fear. Fear of coming on too strong, fear of seeming like they want it too much, fear that if they let themselves be genuinely warm and present, they'll come across as desperate, too easy to read, or somehow less attractive. That fear makes complete sense given what women have absorbed for years from movies, advice columns, and well-meaning friends insisting that playing it cool is the smart strategy. Don't show your hand, don't let him see you care, make him work for it. So women hug a man they genuinely like and hold back. They pull away early, they pat his back a couple times so it doesn't feel like too much, and then they wonder why he doesn't seem more interested. Here's what really matters. There is nothing more attractive than a woman comfortable enough to simply be warm, who can be close to someone without it feeling strange, who can be fully present without spending the whole time managing how she appears. That ease, that groundedness, that quiet sense of being okay right where she is exactly what men mean when they describe a woman as magnetic. They rarely say, "She had this perfect hug technique." They say something more like, "I don't know what it was, she just made everything feel easy and natural." That's presence. That's genuinely what we're talking about here. Not a technique to memorize, just presence. Plenty of women who are strikingly attractive, sharp, and great conversationalists, exactly the kind of woman you'd assume would have no trouble at all, still struggle because in the physical moments that actually count, they're mentally somewhere else. They default to the rushed hug, the distracted expression, the polite smile, and men describe them as nice but hard to read, hard to connect with, and it has nothing to do with looks or conversation. It simply comes down to not really being present in the moments that mattered. The women who turn this around completely aren't the ones who learn a bunch of new moves. They're the ones who get out of their own way, who stop treating every interaction like a performance review, who allow themselves to be warm without immediately retreating out of fear. And the difference in how men respond is dramatic, not because men suddenly like them more as people, but because they can finally actually feel them. You can't really connect with someone you can't feel. And the encouraging part is that once you actually get out of your head, stop watching yourself from the outside and just let yourself be in the moment, your body naturally does the right thing because you already know what genuine warmth feels like. You've felt it from other people. You already know exactly what distinguishes a hug that feels real from one that feels hollow. You already carry everything needed to offer someone the real version. You just have to stop talking yourself out of it. So here's the one thing worth walking away with. Before you go in for your next hug with someone who matters, quietly decide you're going to be fully there for it. Not performing, not managing anything, just present. Arms that actually hold him. One breath that lets you settle, an ending that's unhurried instead of rushed, and one genuine look when it's over. That's it, 4 elements, all coming from the exact same place, choosing to actually show up for the moment instead of observing it from a safe distance. That's what he'll remember, not what you were wearing, not the exact words exchanged, but those 3 or 4 seconds where you were completely and genuinely there with him. And here's what happens over time. Every small moment of real presence stacks on top of the last. Eventually, he doesn't just think you're nice or attractive or interesting. He thinks about you when you're not around. He looks forward to seeing you in a way that's difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore, because you became the person who made him feel like he mattered, like being around you was easy and real and good. That's a feeling no amount of clever conversation or perfect timing can manufacture on its own. This is the part almost nobody explains. So much focus goes into what to say, how to say it, when to text, and all of that has its place. But the moments that genuinely move a man, that shift something inside him, are almost always the quiet physical ones, the ones happening before anyone has time to consciously think. A look held a beat longer than expected, a touch that lingers just a moment more, a hug where he could feel you were genuinely in it. Those are the moments he ends up telling friends about, the moments he replays, the ones that move someone from "I like her" to "I really like her" to "I need to see her again soon." And what's genuinely appealing about all of this is how simple it is once you actually see it clearly. You don't need to change who you are. You don't need some elaborate strategy. You do not necessarily need to become a different person. More often than not, the deepest transformation is not about adding new qualities to yourself, but about gradually removing the habits that keep your authentic self hidden. Growth is often an act of subtraction before it is an act of construction. Layer by layer, you begin letting go of the fears, defenses, and rehearsed versions of yourself that once helped you survive but no longer allow you to fully live. You just need to stop shrinking in the moments that matter. Notice how often the instinct to make yourself smaller arrives at precisely the moments when your real self is trying to emerge. You're about to express what you honestly feel, and then you soften your words until they almost disappear. You're about to share your excitement, but you quickly replace it with indifference so you will not seem too invested. You are about to admit that someone matters to you, but instead you hide behind humor, ambiguity, or silence, because rejection feels less frightening when nothing genuine has been risked. Over time, these moments become so familiar that they no longer feel like choices. They begin to feel like personality. You start believing you are naturally quiet, naturally distant, naturally difficult to know. Yet often, what feels like personality is simply protection, repeated so many times that it has become automatic. Carl Jung wrote that until unconscious patterns become conscious, they continue directing our lives while appearing to be fate. Many people believe they keep meeting the same disappointing outcomes because the world keeps handing them the same circumstances. Sometimes the deeper reality is that the same protective pattern quietly appears every time genuine intimacy becomes possible. You pull back exactly when your heart wants to step forward. You become cautious exactly when trust is beginning to grow. You disappear emotionally at the precise moment another person is beginning to truly see you. Not because you do not want connection, because connection asks something frightening of the ego. It asks to be seen without complete control over the outcome. It asks to remain present even when certainty is unavailable. It asks to risk authenticity instead of managing perception. That is why so many meaningful relationships are not interrupted by a lack of feeling. They are interrupted by fear arriving at the same doorway as love. Then there is another habit that quietly shapes countless lives. You begin observing yourself from the outside instead of living from the inside. Rather than experiencing the conversation, you begin monitoring your performance within it. You wonder whether you sounded intelligent enough, whether your smile lasted too long, whether your message seemed too eager, whether your silence seemed too distant, whether your laughter was appropriate, whether your honesty revealed too much. Instead of meeting another person, you become the audience watching yourself attempt to meet them. The mind splits into two positions. One part tries to participate. The other constantly evaluates the participation. This inner observer was originally created to protect you. Somewhere along the way, perhaps criticism, rejection, embarrassment, or disappointment taught you that careful self-monitoring might prevent future pain. So the psyche developed an internal evaluator that remained constantly alert. Its intention was protection, but protection slowly became imprisonment, because intimacy cannot flourish while every word must first pass through an internal committee of fear. Real connection happens too quickly for constant self-evaluation. It unfolds in spontaneous laughter, in unfinished sentences, in awkward pauses, in moments where neither person knows exactly what to say, yet neither feels compelled to escape the silence. Life itself is wonderfully unedited, yet the anxious mind attempts to edit every scene before it has even happened. This creates a strange paradox. The harder you try to guarantee acceptance, the more distant genuine connection becomes. Not because authenticity is perfect, but because authenticity is alive. It breathes, it hesitates, it occasionally stumbles. It allows imperfection without interpreting it as catastrophe. The irony is that many of the moments people later remember most fondly are precisely the moments that were never planned. The accidental laugh, the unexpected confession, the shared silence that somehow said more than an hour of conversation, the imperfect joke that made both of you laugh because it was imperfect. Human beings rarely fall in love with flawless performances. They connect with presence, with emotional availability, with someone who is willing to occupy the same moment instead of constantly managing how that moment appears. This is why the connection you have been searching for may not be hiding somewhere beyond your reach. It may not require becoming more interesting, more attractive, more accomplished, more impressive. It may simply require becoming more present. Because presence is where relationships actually happen, not in imagined future conversations, not in endless analysis after the interaction has ended, not in rehearsals before it begins. Only here, only now. The present moment is the only place where another person can truly meet you. Every time your attention leaves the present to monitor yourself from a distance, you step slightly away from the relationship unfolding in front of you. You become less available, not because you care too little, but because you are trying so hard to avoid doing the wrong thing that you never fully allow yourself to simply exist within the experience. Jung believed that the deepest psychological task is not becoming someone else, but becoming who you already are beneath the layers of adaptation. Individuation is not a performance. It is a return, a gradual movement away from the masks created by fear and toward the person whose existence no longer depends upon constant self-correction. Imagine what changes when you no longer spend every meaningful interaction asking yourself how you are being perceived. Imagine listening simply to understand instead of planning your next response. Imagine smiling because joy naturally arrived instead of wondering whether your expression looked attractive. Imagine allowing silence to remain silence without rushing to rescue it. Imagine saying what you genuinely mean without rehearsing 10 alternative versions first. Those moments may seem small, but they are where intimacy quietly begins. Not because they guarantee another person's affection, but because they allow another person to encounter someone real instead of someone carefully managed. The remarkable thing is that your capacity for this has never disappeared. It has only been covered by caution, covered by old disappointments, covered by habits that once protected your heart, but eventually began protecting it from life itself. The connection you have been longing for has not necessarily been waiting somewhere far away. In many ways, it has been waiting behind the very defenses that were designed to keep you safe. The moment those defenses soften even slightly, something remarkable happens. Conversation becomes less like performance and more like discovery. Affection becomes less like strategy and more like expression. Presence becomes more valuable than perfection. And relationships stop feeling like examinations you must pass. They begin feeling like places where two imperfect human beings gradually recognize one another through honesty rather than performance. So perhaps the deepest invitation is not to become fearless. Fear will still visit, uncertainty will still whisper, the inner observer may still occasionally appear. The invitation is simply not to surrender the moment to them, to remain, to breathe, to speak before fear edits every sentence. To stay emotionally present when every old instinct tells you to retreat. To trust that authenticity, while never guaranteeing acceptance, gives something far more valuable than certainty. It gives you the freedom to be fully present in your own life. And in that freedom, something quietly extraordinary becomes possible. The connection you have been searching for was never created by perfect timing, perfect words, or perfect performances. It was always waiting on the other side of your willingness to stop standing between yourself and the moment. You do not have to force it into existence. You only have to stop interrupting it long enough for it to unfold naturally, exactly as it was meant to.